Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a really fascinating text called Eternal Riches. We're going to unpack 5 key principles of what it calls the divine art of generosity. If you've ever found yourself wondering how wealth, giving, and eternal value all intersect, well, you are definitely in the right place. So let's just jump right in and see how these age-old ideas translate into a real daily approach to life.
Right out of the gate, the source text hits us with a pretty profound, almost jarring question. What is the true measure of wealth? I mean, in our modern world, we usually answer that with the number in our bank account or the assets we own, right? But the text asks us to completely set aside that financial definition for a minute and look at wealth through a totally different, spiritual lens.
Let's start with Principle 1, the coffee that changed everything, and the power of contagious generosity.
The narrative opens with this great, super relatable personal anecdote about a friend named Murray. Murray was the kind of guy who would always pick up the tab for drinks when they hung out. But the author realizes it was never actually about the money. That coffee was basically a vehicle for a message. It was a simple gesture saying, hey, you matter to me. And micro interactions like that are incredibly powerful because they prove that generosity is literally contagious. When someone values you like that, it just naturally inspires you to open your own heart and do the exact same thing for someone else.
This idea perfectly mirrors a foundational quote from the biblical book of Acts. There is more happiness in giving than in receiving. It suggests that a heart focused on giving actually unlocks a level of joy that a heart purely focused on receiving simply cannot reach. It's a total shift in how we view our daily lives, treating every single interaction as a chance to find that deeper happiness.
So, what stands in the way of all that joy? That brings us to Principle 2, the trap of avarice, and how we end up losing what we keep.
The text points to avarice, or greed, and defines it fundamentally as a false sense of security. It's this tricky, deceptive belief that our safety and our well-being absolutely depend on hoarding things for ourselves. But the author argues this mindset is actually a trap. Instead of protecting us, it restricts our freedom and completely snuffs out our joy.
This creates such a brilliant philosophical paradox. On one hand, avarice ironically loses what it tries so hard to hold back. By gripping our possessions too tightly, we miss out on the freedom of living openly. But on the other hand, generosity gains all it gives. By just releasing our grip, we free our hearts and discover a kind of true freedom that money absolutely cannot buy. To back up this paradox of mutual gain, the text cites Proverbs chapter 11, using this really beautiful agricultural imagery. He who waters will be watered himself. It's basically saying generosity isn't some one-way street where you just lose your resources. It's a deeply reciprocal ecosystem. By nourishing the people around you, you are simultaneously nourishing your own soul.
This builds directly into the core theological thesis of our text, Principle 3, storing treasures in heaven and the call to invest eternally.
The source draws a massive, sharp line between two completely different types of wealth. You've got earthly possessions, which are temporary items we hold on to right now. They're fleeting. And then you have heavenly treasures, the eternal, spiritual fruit that God accomplishes through us. The big takeaway here is that true wealth isn't measured by the assets we pile up, but by the lasting impact our actions have on others.
This whole perspective is anchored in that very famous passage from the Gospel of Matthew, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven." It's an invitation to make a deliberate shift. Stop constantly chasing after temporary earthly goods and start striving to be rich in God. It challenges us to want the kind of riches that have divine value, not just economic value.
But how is this supposed to feel when we do it? Well, when you start looking at things through the lens of eternity, the act of giving transforms completely. It's no longer this burdensome obligation or guilt trip. Instead, as 2 Corinthians points out, it becomes an act of profound freedom and joy. When you realize that every kindness is a life-changing seed, you give enthusiastically because you're focused on the eternal reward, not the temporary cost.
That takes us straight into Principle 4, moving from theory into practice, generosity as a daily lifestyle. The author strongly challenges us not to view generosity as just, a rare, once-a-year charitable event. It needs to be a consistent, daily lifestyle. Every single act of love, no matter how small or under the radar it might be, literally functions as an investment strategy. You aren't just being nice, you're actively investing in something that yields eternal value.
According to the text, we can actually map out the mechanics of this in 3 simple steps. Step 1. Sow abundantly with a sincere heart and in faith.
Step 2. Water others, basically letting God use your generosity to meet their needs. And Step 3. Reap eternal fruit. It's such a beautifully structured way to see how temporary, everyday resources are converted into something with eternal significance.
This whole metaphorical investment concept is summed up perfectly back in 2 Corinthians. There's a direct correlation here. The text asserts that God promises to multiply whatever is generously and faithfully sown. The more abundantly you sow into the lives of others, the more abundantly that eternal fruit is reaped. It's a huge call to live your life with an open hand rather than a closed fist.
As we wrap up this explainer, the source leaves us pondering one final, deeply provocative question. Are you investing in what truly lasts? Every single day, we all spend our time, our energy, and our resources on something. The divine art of generosity challenges us to look right past the temporary and intentionally invest our lives into the eternal. Thank you so much for joining me for this breakdown, and I really hope it gave you some fantastic insights to reflect on today.